Well, good afternoon and welcome. Welcome again to another in our series of Webinar Wednesdays. Good afternoon. I'm Kelly Bearden. I'm the director of the CSU Bakersfield SBDC, and we're back again on another Wednesday, number 18 in our series that started back on March 18th. Thank you for joining us, and thank you all those that have been along for the entire ride. So today we're going to be going over a lot of things, but first of all, a few little housekeeping notes for you. We're going to have both the chat and the question box open, but put your questions in the question box and we'll have plenty of time to get to your questions afterwards. After that, if you have something else to add, you can use the chat box and go into the chat as well. At the end of the webinar, we will be releasing a survey, and the survey is very important for us because what it does is it really allows us to get some insight on the direction of where this webinar needs to go and the topics that you really want and the ones that you want to hear coming up as we continue to kind of weave our way through this pandemic. So let's get going. You know, the CSU Bakersfield SBDC is part of over 1,000 centers across the country. America's SBDCs, America's Small Business Development Centers in all 50 states, many US territories, and others. We have 6 regions here in California. We are part of the Central California region. As you probably know by now, we serve all of Kern County, which is the 3rd largest geographic county in the state of California out of 58, and we also serve Inyo and Mono. In addition, we have 5 other centers throughout the Central California region. We have up in the Clovis region, we have Richard T. Mostert, who's actually my associate up there, my colleague, who serves Fresno, Kings, Tulare, and Madera County. Up to the far northern San Joaquin Valley, we have Katie Winders serving Stanislaus and Tuolumne counties. Over on the Central Coast in San Benito and Monterey counties is Cindy Merzon, and San Luis Obispo, Judy Mahan. So feel free to contact any of my colleagues at these centers. If you have any questions about the services SBDCs can provide your businesses through this pandemic, through the problems and the issues we're going through. We're here to help, free consulting, other training opportunities. So please do take advantage of this service. Thank all of our sponsors who have been along for the ride and really kind of make these webinars possible. In addition, let's get on with today. I know I've promised you, I've kind of shortchanged you, felt a little guilty about the time we've spent in the spreadsheets and going over some of the details regarding forgiveness and some of the other things. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend a considerable amount of time in that particular spreadsheet. But what we're going to do is, you know, EIDL had a kind of a big announcement over the weekend, and EIDL Advance is now closed. The EIDL Advance program had $20 billion that it was allocated. And the EIDL Advance went to businesses who did not qualify for the EIDL loan and businesses that did qualify. So if you filed an application and that application was processed and you received an advance, then you're part of that $20 billion. Now, some of that will need to be repaid, as you recall, because if you received a PPP loan, the EIDL Advance will go through the PPP process and not be forgiven and actually repaid over 2 to 5 years, depending on your particular situation. And we'll get into a little of the 2 to 5 year thing as we go. Kern Recovers is continuing to actually do a lot and kind of make a lot of loans. As of yesterday, they were up around almost close to $22 million. Only $3 million are left in the loan program. So you're really at kind of the last minute, last second hopes. I did hear a Kern County supervisor last week mention that potentially if some of the CARES Act money that they had for Kern Recovers and some of the other programs, if they didn't have to spend as much in the actual, the health side of things, in the alternative health centers and things like that, that they might have more resources to give to small businesses as we come down the road. But obviously, that's a little too soon to determine right now. The other part of Kern Recovers is the PPE program. And I know you're wondering how many times I'm going to confuse those two acronyms that start with P and P. And my goal is 0 today, but the PPE program, what it does is it allows distribution of a lot of PPE to small businesses throughout Kern County. Last week, we had Jim Service on, who talked in depth about the program as it rolls out. Couldn't be of more importance as coronavirus continues to spike this summer in the state of California and throughout the San Joaquin Valley and in Kern County specifically. Maybe not as much as it had, but we'll see. Maybe the PPE program is actually helping. Again, PPE is available along the Eastern Sierra. Consult with your local Chamber of Commerce there. And if you're in other regions, contact your local SBDC and see if there's something that can be done in your area to get these vital supplies and PPE in your business. Okay, some other news this week actually came out yesterday was we saw where 3 of the major banks, Chase, Citibank, and Wells Fargo, are starting to brace for defaults by setting aside loan loss reserves of, to this point, about $28 billion. And still another major bank, B of A, still out there. So it's kind of an indication of what's to come as far as banks are expecting to have write-offs, particularly in a lot of the areas that are really troubling right now. We are seeing a lot of that in obviously the travel and the hospitality industry and retail, big retail. There's some big failures that are starting to happen with Brooks Brothers and others. So what we're starting to see is now that we've kind of gone through the PPP honeymoon, we're really starting to again push the need to really be conscious of your cash flow. And we're going to return to that a little bit later today after being away for several weeks as we've dealt with other PPP, EIDL, Kern Recovers, and many other issues. More of the state of California is facing shutdowns, and you're seeing the shutdowns that are occurring. We have statewide shutdowns now for a variety of types of businesses, including bars, both inside and outside, and restaurants for inside dining, and others that we'll go over in a little bit. And then also you have the monitoring sites, the monitoring counties that are considered to be on the edge of meeting the 5 reason criteria of why the state actually shuts down businesses and actually goes on to that second wave of enforcing other businesses to close. So we'll go over that list in a little bit. We're going to obviously talk about managing the PPP forgiveness and talk about that. We're going to have a little bit of news on the next stimulus. Well, we might as well do that now. Not a lot of news right now. And when I say little news, I mean there's very little news with Congress kind of on recess until later this month. And with a looming recess in August, we're really anticipating, hoping to see more on stimulus. One of the packages from the last stimulus was the Main Street Lending Program. And we haven't talked a lot about that, but it's kind of a program that's coming out of the Federal Reserve, made for small to medium-sized businesses. And these businesses actually are starting off with, I believe, loan volume size of about $2.5 million up. The program is really kind of off to a slow start because a lot of banks aren't wanting to participate. So we should have more on that maybe in a couple of weeks, and hopefully there'll be more because there's $600 billion in that program. And right now there's probably very little or no lending actually occurring out of that, while the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department iron out differences that they have on that particular program. So hopefully more on stimulus next week or the week after. And then also your questions. And we'll get to your questions today on July 15th. And also, let's do a poll. Let's get into that poll and actually bring that up and see what we got. Okay, so our first poll question And as we go and launch this poll, it's on actually the EIDL advance. And it's not including the EIDL advance. What we want to kind of know today is how much of your PPP loan do you hope to have forgiven? So not including the EIDL advance because we know that that's not going to be forgiven. But let's launch this poll on not including EIDL advance. I hope to have this percentage of my PPP loan forgiven. 100%, 85 to 99%, 70 to 85 or less than 70. The 100%ers are making a very loud and clear argument, about 80% so far, but getting a few on the other categories, including 85 to 99. We've got about 55% of you have voted right now, and the big leader right now is the 100%, 4 and 5. It's the 4 out of 5 rule. And give you one last second, and we're going to close the poll and end it right now. And here we go. Sharing the results, you'll see that 80% want your PPP loan 100% forgiven. And that is pretty much as I would have seen fallen in line. 15% are going to fall under that. And there could be some very good managerial decisions being made on why you don't want it entirely forgiven. Paying a supplier or other things that are outside of the forgiveness range. And we see 3% of you, 70 to 85%, and 2% less than 70%. Okay, thank you for voting. And let's move on to our second poll question, of which we just have 2 today. And the poll question is, I hope to finish my forgiveness application by the end of, and your choices are July, August, October, or by the end of the year 2020. So a lot of that's going to depend on when you actually received your PPP loan. And we're starting to see the first 2, July and August. So hopefully we're getting a lot of those that hope to wrap up early. It's kind of a horse race between noses separate July and August. Give you another couple of seconds to jump in there and vote. And then we'll conclude the poll, share the results, and move on with our presentation today. And there you have it. August, narrowly edging July. And those 2 are basically your 4 out of 5, your 80%. So 80% of you want to conclude it by July and August. The other 20% are looking at the end of October and potentially the end of the year. So perhaps in the 4th quarter of this wonderful year of 2020. So thank you again for voting. I think that tells us a lot right there. Now, those of you that selected July, you still have a challenge because you only have a half of a month to get everything done and to get with your bank. And many of you might not even have a bank that will be accepting them until August. So, you know, still a good goal would be to get that done in August sometime. 80% of you would like that. Okay. Let's proceed. So one thing I just kind of wanted to go over again is we're starting to see, and we'll cover this a little bit in a few minutes also, but just kind of once again go over the working capital definition and what you can spend your money on in EIDL. We're continuing at the SBDC, or at least I am, to see, and some of our consultants, a lot of instances where people are spending their EIDLs on other than working capital, which is kind of not within the rules and guidelines of the loan agreement and authorization that has been signed by you, the borrower. So this is the SBA definition, and I took it from an Express Loan, another loan program that they had a couple of years ago. And in some cases still they do have that program. But working capital is the amount of capital that is available for the day-to-day operations of a business. Working capital is typically used to pay for regular expenses. And you see those expenses there: utilities, payroll, rent, inventory, marketing, somewhat, etc. Now, in the EIDL, it does say you can pay notes payable. I'm not 100% sure you could pay a note payable that is taking out during the period of the EIDL is going on. It might need to be a note that actually precedes you receiving the EIDL. But there is that as well. And as we continue to run into instances where people have used it in other ways, we'll talk a little bit later about maybe some EIDL strategies for fixing any EIDL misconceptions you might have had or any uses. And I know I've heard a lot of reasons and there have been a lot of fixed asset purchases that make totally good business sense, 100% good business decisions. And especially in these times of multiple shutdowns, businesses being closed, need to reinvent a business model, but still the loan document that you signed and that you are going to be responsible to is going to hold this definition. So we are going to have a few suggestions as we roll on about that, but I wanted to clear and get out first and foremost, while we talk about EIDL and the EIDL advanced leaving, the definition that we work with as far as working capital that is in your document. Okay, so let's talk about the forgiveness. 4 out of 5 of you, 80% want to be done with it by the end of August. And I think that there are some really good reasons for a strategy like that. And by doing it quickly, and we'll get into those. So just a few things that are going to help your likelihood of forgiveness. The forgiveness process is something we're going to go over. And it is a different type of process that I think that we were looking at early on. But I think it's, if it's possible to do so, and I know you're down the road with this, most of you are probably pretty early PPP originators and got into the process early. But it's still, if you've been able to keep the funds separate, that is going to provide you the easiest way to track funds and to prove it to both your lender and the SBA. Remember, the process involves your lender first and foremost, is going through your lender, going through their way of tracking it. We're going to go over both forms today, the 3805EZ that most of you will be able to use, and the regular, now long form, which is a 5-page document. So the easiest way that you can convince your lender, who then needs to ship it off to the SBA, by keeping those funds separate and keeping disciplined records, it's going to really help you. So the organization factor is going to be a big key in all this and getting your documents and getting everything presented. So, hey, I'm back with a nice big wordy screen full of words, but it seemed like it was a pretty good one that I would, that I wanted to didn't want to cut down too much or to bullet off and to try to keep it mostly intact, to kind of keep it in whole. So once your application is submitted to the lender, they have 60 days in order to review, ask additional information, documentation, and approve the forgiveness in whole or in part. So they're going to be looking at third-party provider information, such as, like, say, ADP, if you have a payroll service or a different payroll service. And I'm under the impression that those payroll services are now actually creating specifically reports for PPP loan forgiveness. I don't know if there's going to be an additional fee, likely, but they will have a lot of, if you use a third-party payroll provider, they will likely provide PPP loan forgiveness reports that make the process hopefully a lot easier. So then once your lender is conducted, once they've gone through the process and they've done their review, it will then be submitted to the SBA for its review. Now, this was the process that kind of threw me, because I know with so many PPP loans and having to individually review, I would imagine there's going to be some type of an automated process, a platform where these are uploaded into, kind of like the application process. And then the ones that will actually cruise right through will then be given the approval, and then we'll probably run into a process like say the EIDL loan process, to where If there's some kind of instance to where some abnormal kicks it out, there'll be more of a process to where it's either kicked back or you go through a process of fixing what's wrong with the application. So, but SBA have a 90 days to conduct a review. So now all of a sudden we're 150 days potentially into this. I don't see any of these taking 150 days, but the guidance that has been provided is saying that it's basically could take as long as 5 months to get that process completely cleared up. So lenders 60 days, SBA 90 days, and they can approve, ask for more information, or approve a portion of it. And really one of the benefits that we're going to talk about on applying for forgiveness as early as possible would be to maybe fix some of the things and to maybe change from even an 8-week to a 24-week period. So when we get into that, you know, they approve all of it and we go from there. So that's kind of the process that we're looking at. I honestly don't think the time process is going to be that much. You're going to see, given the volume of applications that come in and the time that they're all going to start hitting at the same time, there's going to be some automated systems by potentially your lender and definitely by, I would imagine, the SBA in processing this forgiveness process. So most of you are, as we talked about last week, most of you are going to be able to use the EZ forgiveness form, Form 3508EZ. And so with the EZ form, you are basically able to use it if you're self-employed and don't have any employees. And also you'll be able to use it if you did not reduce the salary or wages. And we'll show you why this comes up on the forms. It's amazing. The forms tell so many answers, and as we found earlier in the process, when we were looking at other aspects of it. So the EZ form will not have an area where if you've reduced your employees' wages, salaries, or hours by 25% or more. And also, if you experienced a reduction in business as a result of the health directives, and this is, you'll know, the safe harbor #1 for full-time equivalents. This is that rule right there. Whereas if you did not bring everybody back, there is kind of this now catch-all that's really coming into play because of a repeated shutdown now. So you're actually seeing a number of businesses, and if you're in those areas, now businesses that do not fall within those businesses that have been forced to close by state mandate, or even by local regulations, or have changed dramatically because of, or could not meet because of many of the distancing and some of the other policies in place. We're really starting to see this as a true exemption for a lot of people, as unfortunately the situation is getting worse. So, you know, I got to get to our role, but I'm not going to do it just yet. I'm going to now jump into kind of the spreadsheet and kind of go there and kind of go in, and promised you some quality spreadsheet time today. And by golly, we're going to do it, even if we start off with a lot of text in a document that's made for numbers. So let's first just kind of review the state mandated closures, and the ones at the top of the list are the ones that we know are closed everywhere in the state of California, even in a lot of the remote areas to where they're not even having issues, but they still are forced to close. And so what are we looking at? We're looking at bars, both inside and out. We're looking at indoor restaurants as far as dining goes, wineries and tasting rooms that are indoors, theaters, other entertainment, your bowling alleys, your miniature golfs, etc. Indoor museums and zoos, and also, you know, card rooms and other gambling establishments like that. You know, it just says card rooms. It doesn't say anything about casinos. So maybe that is just specific statewide to card rooms. So those counties that are on the monitored counties, which is the watch list, and what I'm going to do is provide you in the update, we'll provide you this Excel that we're going to go over today, which is PPP by the numbers, number 18, corresponding with today's 18th webinar. What we're going to do is we'll provide this to you in an email afterwards, like we typically do on Thursday or Friday. And also we'll give you the link where you can go in and look at the 5 parameters and look at the county breakdown and see how it affects you individually. So for us in Kern County, we were kind of being braced and expected to, because we came off the monitored counties list on Monday. Very happy about that. And we were anticipating, because I believe the number of hotels, or excuse me, the number of hospital stays, if you owned a hotel, you'd like hotel stays to go up, but hospital stays and hospital visits and hospital occupancy rates were increasing. And if they increased for 3 days, which was forecast for Saturday, we were going to be forced to be a monitored county and force the following businesses to close: gyms, salons, barbershops, indoor malls, non-essential offices. And hey, you know, it's not fun being called a non-essential office. I think we're doing something good here, but yes, we would be subject to close. And it is good to be back in a real environment of an office, rather than where you have seen me in my home office for the last several weeks. And also indoor places of worship would actually fall into that category. Yeah, don't get that siren outside my home office very often. So it's great to be back. So those are some of the things that are, and really, are we getting tired of that mandated word too? I got to quit using that. So those are the things, and we'll send you the link to where you can go to if you want to monitor that a little closer. Earlier, we were talking about some EIDL strategies, and we're continuing to see, you know, not a dramatic, but enough individuals using their EIDL for other uses than what it's dictated in their LANA, which is their loan agreement and authorization. So if you could place it in a separate account, it's always good to have the money separate and to be able to use it separate. Read your loan agreement very carefully. Read it again. And note that, as we discussed earlier, working capital and notes payable are the uses that are allowable. So what has happened is, what happens if you've, if something's come up to where you've needed to use it for another use that is not working capital or notes payable? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to work with borrowers on that and try to fix that situation. We're trying to do a fix for what's broken. And I haven't vetted this past anybody, but it sounds like it's reasonable and plausible to me, is that if you have used your proceeds from your EIDL for a non-authorized use, and let's just say it's equipment that authorized and actually allowed your business to actually continue working during a shutdown. You were able to change something in your business model that would allow you to sell when it's been shut down. Again, it's survival out there, and people are going to do what they need to do to survive. So let's fix what's broken. Maybe you did take fixed assets and pulled them out. So now maybe we're looking at maybe trying to utilize and to replenish those funds and not use it as a short-term loan, but just use it as a use that was vital for your business, and then try to augment what you use against your EIDL. So you set up your EIDL, and let's say it's $150,000. And in my example here, I'm using that has no numbers on the page. Let's say 50,000 of it was a vital piece of equipment that allowed you to change your business model significantly to stay in business and to still meet the needs of your customers. So potentially what you do is maybe use a spreadsheet and show then the expenses that are going to go against that. Maybe that's not that $50,000. Maybe it's definitely not that $50,000. So what you try to do then is maybe through cash flow for the next shorter term period. Maybe it's the cash flow you're generating because you were able to use that asset that you're able to then kind of pay yourself back and to continue to use working capital as we move along, particularly when your PPP loan is gone. You know, that's a very valid strategy. As your PPP runs out, then your idle kicks in. And so you're using payroll and you're using rent and you're using all the other things that we defined as working capital earlier in order to pay that back, to where you list on all the expenditures that you use for idle, $150,000 of expenditures that were working capital or notes payable. Again, it's not the optimum situation, but you know, it is, I think, a way as we go through this crisis of utilizing those particular funds, if you had misused those funds in order to perhaps fix what's broken. And that's all we're trying to do. So on your idle strategy, we're really trying to get people to use it for the long game because we really don't know how long we're in this mess. And working capital is available. The working capital that's available to those that have the idles, that were able to get idles, are really going to be a really, really valuable tool. You know, we've speculated in the past that the next round of PPP, if there is a second round, is going to be very targeted and very focused on those industries that have been forced to close. And we listed those up here: bars, restaurants, wineries, movie theaters, etc. Those that were forced to close and those that have been dramatically impacted. And that is going to be travel related, hotels, events, and other types of things like that. So use it for the long game, but do also use it for what you need. So a little bit of an audit strategy in our last, which should have been a slide, but you know, isn't, just because I needed it in here, is the strategic election. And so what we're going to go over here is we're going to go over, there's a number of strategic elections that you have within the PPP that as a manager is really the managerial process that you still have until those funds are 100% expended. And you still have the option of going from 8 to 24 weeks as long as your loan predated the June 5th, when week 24 was the actual date that was used after. So 24 weeks after June 5th. So 8 or 24. Why 8 weeks might be better. Okay, if you elect 8 weeks, if you expend all your 8 weeks, your funds in an 8-week period, if you got them early and you had your plan and you weren't really optimistic that it was going to go to a longer period of time, expended it, you can expend it in 8 weeks with likely full forgiveness. And using the full forgiveness, then it's probably best to get it off your books. If you met the full-time equivalent without having to rely on the safe harbor. We talked a little bit about the safe harbor for COVID, but in the past, including last week, we spent some time talking about the full-time equivalent employees, and that is having the same number of employees in your business that you had on February 15th. So meeting that, along with the exemptions on why people weren't able to be rehired, such as they went to another job, they were on unemployment, they accepted another position which was full-time instead of part-time. As long as you made that written request to them and have that, that is on the forgiveness form and can be used for forgiveness. So if you've met that safe harbor after 8 weeks, or you met that without relying on the safe harbor, you're clean, you're really clear in the books there, because you're not relying on any other way to meet that requirement. Another reason you might elect 8 weeks over 24, you received your EIDL loan and you have it in place. We kind of just discussed this. You've used your PPP loan, you have your EIDL sitting there, and it's your EIDL's for working capital, and boom, you slide in seamlessly behind that. So if you get a rejection from either the bank or SBA, once you do apply, if you apply after 8 weeks and you reply early, you know, it might be possible to go back and re-elect under 24 weeks if your application is for forgiveness is rejected. Or there could be other funds, or you could go back. So you could maybe then go back and say, well, gee, you know, I've still got 10 weeks throughout the rest of this year, is I can elect over now 24 weeks potentially and change that. And where that really might kick in is if you are a sole proprietorship and as a business owner, you can take up to $20,833 if you actually received the full amount of $100,000. And maybe you did not, maybe you dumped it into your account and said, well, gee, I just paid myself. It would probably be a little bit more prudent to go into a different scenario to where you do kind of like this individual, Kelly Grill, does here, where you allocate that over so much per week to get to that total. And to do that, to reach, one thing you're going to find is that to reach the $20,833, you're going to have to go 24 weeks. So, but that could be an example of why you might elect to go to that particular program instead, or that particular timeline. So let's look at why 24 might be better. Well, we just looked at that, 24 weeks. So you look at number E down here, 24 weeks are needed to pay the business owner, to pay the full maximum cap of $20,833. So you need to allocate that over a longer period of time. Obviously, with 24 weeks, you have more time to expend the funds. If you weren't going to spend the money, that's kind of why the rules were changed, why the PPP was modified to allow 24 weeks to give you more time to spend the money. It also might be easier for you then to reach 60% of your payroll goal for forgiveness. Your cash flow might be a reason. Coming back to managing your PPP. Your cash flow, you might be able to augment it over a longer period of time. Maybe you have a PPP and you don't have the EIDL coming in behind it. And so what you have is you have maybe the ability to use existing cash flow to help spread those PPP funds over a much larger period of time. So there are a couple of reasons why that we might actually see that as well. So let's look at 3 scenarios here. And you've seen 2 of these. You haven't seen the middle one, Mr. Hedges Fund. And I just wanted to show a challenge that maybe higher amount of PPP, or at least higher revenue of small businesses, some of the challenges that all of us face, including them. So you have the one that we've looked at extensively on the right and on the left. We have the mom and pop, which is an example of a sole proprietor with no employees. We have the Kelly's Grill, 15 FTEs, done it extensively and how we've used that particular program. Look at this, 13 million in sales, but still only 15 FTEs for Mr. Hedge Fund. So Mr. Hedges Fund, maybe it is a hedge fund, but as you can see, it is just full of high-ended individuals. For example, of the individuals that make up the payroll expenses, they're earning, it looks like around $300,000 a year. And then you have your owner compensation, which is very nice owner compensation, I might add, 1.2 million. So when we bring this down through the process and did the calculations, again for PPP, because we can calculate under these scenarios where it's going to align and how much that their loan amount was. Again, Kelly's Grill was 100,000, taking average payroll. Taking the exclusions, you lose most of the payroll for Mr. Hedges Fund to where there's only 1.5 million. That's a allocable payroll. Divide that by the monthly payroll and times it by the factor, and you see a loan of only about $312,500 for a business with far greater payroll. Now, that's the reason I put that in there, is because it really comes into a managerial decision on how you're going to spread that out and how you're going to allocate it. And, you know, in this particular business, it looks like they're all valued employees. There's not going to be any issues, but really the least likely scenario is any of those people leaving the organization and being able to pay them each over a period of time. So if we went into kind of the grill that we've looked at in many instances, the Kelly's Grill, you've seen this many times. It's the same forecast. Actually, this was the forecast that was the plan. If you noticed last week, we moved it up because we saw statewide restaurants, dine-in restaurants were closing, and we wanted to try to meet our FTEs right then. So it was our best interest then to accelerate our payments into that. So whereas we had planned to go over a much longer period of time and augment cash flow like we talked about, instead, we jumped into this scenario and did this. Okay, move that thing out of the way. We did this. We actually then accelerated it, as you see. So much of it was done 6/15, and finally we wrapped it up right here. That was the subtotal for the first 8 weeks when we were shooting for an 8-week period. We got to 24 weeks, we extended it over, but instead we cut it off in week 11 because we actually wanted to end it right then and seek forgiveness. Okay. So on that, the forgiveness form would look something like this. This is a form that actually we had earlier under the first original forgiveness form, the 3508. Remember that 11-page document? And all this does is take out with the easy, it takes out the 25% reduction and it takes out the FTE. So before we get into this, let's jump online real quick and let's look at the actual forms. So, okay. And getting into the forms. Let's get that. Please bear with me. I have a minor technical glitch here, but there we go. So this is the full-size form, is the first one, and it's the full 5 pages. And we've looked at a lot of this. And there was the 11 items. We just looked at a form that had basically the easy, that had the same issues, except it didn't have this adjustments for full-time salary and wage reduction. Because you checked a box that said that you did not reduce your employees by 25%. And also the full-time equivalents were, because of COVID, the safe harbor exemption number 1. So going through this, then on both forms, you're going to have this document. And this document is going to be basically the certifications and representations you make as a borrower. So these are things you're going to have to certify in order to get this processed. I think they're pretty straightforward. You used it for payroll, you used it for valid uses, etc. If you use the safe harbor exemption, you weren't able to return to work for a particular reason, so forth and so have you. The long form retains both the Schedule A and the Schedule A worksheet. So if you are forced to use the Schedule A and the Schedule A worksheet, more of a complex analysis going through it. Again, you weren't able to, for a number of reasons. Again, most borrowers are going to use the EZ form, including even some significantly larger PPP amounts, because you're able to check this box right there. Right there. You're able to check that safe harbor exemption number 1 has been met because of health concerns and issues of the coronavirus. There's your worksheet that actually goes on with that, and that's your form. Okay, the last one, of course, being the optional demographic information form that, of course, we encourage you to fill out. Okay, let's pull up the other form. And of course, it doesn't want to. it just wants to pull this one up. Okay, so then there's this one, which is not allowing me to go the easy route. Stop that. So, okay, so we won't go the easy route, but we have the form here to actually share with you. The one really great thing about the EZ form is that the form's only 3 pages, yet the instructions 4 pages. Love that. Okay, so here on the EZ, the only thing missing again is the certification, is that we've checked that box saying we had met the 25 and we met the PPE because of Safe Harbor 1 exemption. So let's go and look at what happens if our payroll, and these numbers are from our spreadsheet. We use the spreadsheet that we have to plan, and really this is a great planning tool, and we do have a couple of other ones that are available to you. And I know I just went to that form, but I should have shared it. So let's go with the payroll and the non-payroll cost. If you look at that on my worksheet, 78,000 was in payroll of the 100,000 for Kelly's Grill. We had the rent payments, we have utilities, the total amount going down through there. There we go. So what happens if we don't meet the 100% forgiveness? So for a variety of reasons, maybe I only ended up with 58,000 of my 100,000. Maybe I needed to pay a supplier to keep busy and keep working. Maybe there's a lot of other factors. Maybe I had a very uncooperative landlord who was requiring me to pay rent, knows about the PPP, and I had to pay higher amounts for rent than maybe my rent's higher. A number of reasons. So let's use both scenarios here and only a difference of 14,000 here between these two that do not meet the total threshold for forgiveness. Now, remember several weeks ago when there was this, if you don't meet the 60% threshold, do you fall off the cliff and get nothing, or do you get a sliding scale up there? And we went through the form to basically prove and to show that it is a sliding scale, and we'll see that really dramatic here. So if you were able to only spend 44%, you met a threshold that was much smaller. And then going here, the amount that was forgiven is only going to be 73,000. So what's unique about this is that by spending 14,000 less than payroll here, we're coming up with an amount that's $23,333 less in forgiveness that we're going to have to repay. So that 14,000 is costing us 23,000. Again, might be some very valid business reasons why you do that and why you might want to do that. But if you miss it by a few $1,000s, then the forgiveness is much smaller. And remember, these aren't in addition to the EIDL amounts that are going to be added back and you're going to be repaid at the end of it as well. And that is another thing. Some borrowers are coming to me and saying, gee, I don't even want to have anything that I have to pay back. Can I repay my EIDL advance at the time of closing? And the answer is yes. So if you had a $10,000 EIDL advance, you can go back and actually then do that. So a little bit of the forgiveness form there. Again, you'll have a copy of this also in an Excel spreadsheet if you'd like it. This is the full-length version of it, because I think if you need to get into the full-length version, you'll need the actual worksheets and the Schedule A in order to do so. A couple of other things that are available this week. You can use your own payroll numbers here and do that in there, and also the Schedule A. Okay. Well, let's jump into some questions and see what you have for us this week. And go into the question box. I need to stop my share. Or actually, I don't. So here we go. Here's an EIDL question. If you have the same owner for affiliate companies, Does the EIDL automatically deny one application due to it being the same owner? You know, we have seen that, and I don't have an answer for you. We've seen where there's common ownership in affiliate companies, and I think it comes down to if the two are truly affiliated. And my best guess answer would be yes, if they are truly affiliated. If they are separate companies, maybe no. It's kind of interesting. There was an example I read about this week of something we'll talk about in, maybe a few weeks, about the bankruptcy option. And it was an individual who ran a number of restaurants and had a small chain of restaurants, maybe 20 or 30 restaurants, and had them all individually owned. Now, there was still the common ownership aspect, but, I think if I had this question, what I would do is tomorrow at 11 o'clock, I would attend the SBA Fresno District EIDL reconsideration, because it sounds like you might have been denied on one of the two applications, and get verification from them. And do bring a lot of facts, and get there early and put your question in the question box right when you get there at 11. Because this is a sophisticated question that won't probably be covered, or sometimes it is. But definitely the Fresno district of the SBA on 11 o'clock on Thursday does have an EIDL reconsideration. And anybody who's been denied for EIDL, this is an opportunity to jump in there and to actually look at the particular reasons on why you were denied, and to try to go back and potentially appeal that decision. Do you think it's worth applying for Kern Recovers if you received a PPP? I do. I absolutely do. If you have a need for the working capital or other reasons. And the Kern Recovers is a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 payroll, working capital, and rents and utilities. So it's more versatile and kind of makes it a little bit easier. But it comes down to if you have a need for it. But if your PPP is running out and your business has been closed and has been closed multiple times, you probably do have a need. I would apply. Now, the only thing is, as we mentioned earlier today, there's only $3,000 or $3 million left in the program. And I really think you need to apply by today. I applied with a local bank on Kern Recovers, never received notification of application. I have directly emailed and left messages. Should you apply at a different bank? I would not. I would continue to try to reach out and potentially even maybe drive down to the branch, and the only reason I'm saying that is because of there being literally just a small amount of money in there. So what I would do is, if I have an application that's pending and I haven't heard anything, I hate to say you need to really bug these people, but if you have an application, I would not apply with another source. I would only apply with one lender. And with Kern Recovers, what I would do, since the funds are running low, they could be replenished later, but this amount of funds are running low, I would get in there ASAP. Is there a deadline for completing forgiveness applications? Yes, it would be at the end of your covered period, which is going to be December 31st, 2020. If you elect the 24-week period, it would be at the end of the year. If your business uses 100% of your PPP funds by week 12 of the 24-week period, when should the business apply for forgiveness? I would apply after your bank starts accepting the applications, because the SBA has came out and said that you do not need to wait to the end of the 24-week period. This gets your process, your application going. If you have any issues with any of the expenditures, potentially, since that period is still open, maybe you could still get that fixed and get it resolved if there's an issue there. Okay, let's see. I voluntarily reduced my salary by more than 25%, being to high risk, but nobody else. So I think what you're saying is you've reduced voluntarily reduced your salary by more than 25% by being high risk. So if you are the owner and you have a PPP that has both an owner portion and a payroll portion, which there are some, many of the lenders did it without including the owner in that. But there was an opportunity, particularly later on, I think when everything kind of slowed down and kind of things became better known, and there was an opportunity to use your 2.5 times your monthly income based on your 2009 Schedule C off your income taxes. And if you did that, I don't see any reason, even if you did reduce your salary, I would extend it over the 24-week period of time. And if you have a component for owner salary and employee, I would take that amount, unless you want to allocate it to some of your employees, because you can, do it that way as well over a 20-week period of time. Remember, your PPP was only based on 8 weeks of earnings for the employees that you had on February 15th. So if you extend it over 24 weeks, you don't have the entire amount of funds to extend those employees. So you could do it either way. Okay, Cheryl, I got your email address, and I don't know why you didn't get the others. And yes, seasonal employees. Cheryl, let's do this. Go to our website and actually, and this is available to anybody else, but Cheryl, go to our website, and because you have a very unique seasonal business, and there's seasonal considerations with winter season and summer seasons and the timing of all this, and sign up for SBDC services, and you and I will do a Zoom for 1 hour consulting session and get all of your questions answered. And I'm sorry it's taken this long on seasonal aspects. Is either Inyo and Mono County on the list of closures? Not at this time. So not at this time, although I did hear something that remote communities are kind of increasing more so, but Inyo and Mono are not on those counties. How do you get a copy of your EIDL loan agreement? It should be emailed to you, and you actually do a DocuSign, which of course, remember now, DocuSign, even though you're printing your name in and you're saying you're signing it, you're printing your name in rather than signing it, is a legal document. But you should have received that with your DocuSign. I have heard, Robert, of a few other people that have had issues with them getting their EIDL loan agreement. And, that might be even a better question for the experts over at SBA and EIDL on their reconsideration webinar that they're having tomorrow at 11 a.m. Okay, if we choose the alternative period, can we submit for forgiveness beforehand? Yes, we mentioned that. And yeah, absolutely. And your loan date was 6/25, so I don't think you've reached that, but potentially you have, depending on that. Well, here's a good question. Are the FTEs, now this is not if you're using one of the exemptions like the COVID-19 shutdowns, and so if you're trying to reach, like we showed in our example, reach that 15 FTEs for Kelly's Grill, are the FTEs, are they measured on the average of the covered period or on one date? I believe I read on the application form that it is on the date of the actual forgiveness application. So that complicates things as well, because if you are trying to actually meet that requirement for FTE, then it is on the date of forgiveness. Now, remember, you don't have to wait till the end of the 24-week period. You can actually do that, but coinciding, wrapping up even a 24-week period with the maximum number of employees is probably the way to go if you're trying to meet that. And remember, in our example of the grill, we cut short. We had planned to spend it over a longer period of time, but since we have on-site dining and we knew we were going to be shut down, we moved it up and paid a lot more of our employees finished it at that time. And I believe you can use on your date, as far as your forgiveness date, the last day you expended funds, but that's another question that we'll have to get answered for us. Yes. Yes, Laurel. Same seasonable situation. We can meet one-on-one on that. Sign up as a client on the SBDC website, and then officially I can do that. If your 8-week period is not amended, would you still be able to claim forgiveness for 24 weeks? You can claim 24 weeks. It's an option. So you get an 8 to 24 week option. Now, the only difference to that is you have a PPP after June 5th, and then it is an automatic 24 week. But before that, you get an option to where you can do the 8-week or you can do the 24 week. And I might have answered this question for you. Can you wait till the end to take the all 20,000 of the $20,833? I wouldn't do that. I would actually show some way, shape, or form, either on a monthly basis or whatever, how you split that out, meeting the maximum of the $1,900 a week. So to go $20,833 for a business owner that is at the $100,000 compensation level, then what you have to do is you have to elect 24 weeks. And I would do it either over a period of time, but I would take every precaution, because if you drop that $20,000 at one time, it really doesn't show that it has been spread out over the period of time over the 24 weeks. Maybe we'll get guidance on that and they'll say that's fine, but I would take the safe road on that one. Does the EIDL have to be, has it have a time frame of when funds have to be spent? Great question. No answer. That's one thing that we're kind of waiting on, and I think that might be something that comes down the road all of a sudden, because, you know, there could be a period of time to when that happens. There might not be. But as long as there are cash flow needs because of the pandemic, it's going to be open. I would anticipate it being open at least through the rest of this year. I think that once you have it and you continue using it for cash flow, I mean, you want to manage it the best you can, which could be, we could be in this problem next year. We could be in this problem until we have a vaccine. And that's the way I need to, if I have an EIDL, that's the way I need to manage my EIDL. And because survival is what it's about. So no time frame. And I really wouldn't anticipate a time frame anytime this year or anytime next year. The email, we will include the forgiveness forms on the weekly email that goes out Thursday or Friday. Check your email, because you should get it if you are an attendee of this, because it goes to all attendees. So it could be going to, since it's considered a bulk email, it could be considered in your clutter or in your junk. Okay, more questions. The local banks still accepting PPP applications? It's a good question, and I wished I had a good answer. I would imagine, at least as far as local banks that are still accepting, I would imagine most of them are. I know a lot of lenders, particularly a lot of fintech, a lot of smaller lenders kind of closed down, but I would guess that many of them are still doing that. Okay, I have 14 employees, and we applied for a $14,000 EIDL loan, and we got 1,000. Is that the loan or the advance? What that's telling me, you know, SP, what that's telling me is that that's an advance, and actually there isn't an amount that you actually apply for They were making the advance based on 10 employees up to $10,000. The EIDL calculation is done completely separate. It is based off of your gross profit of your business. And it is a calculation that is, which is a trade secret of SBA. They won't tell me. They won't tell me because I'll tell you. So it's a trade secret, but it's based off of gross profit. So your sales minus your cost of sales. And it's done with some algorithm out of that I have no idea. So the $14,000, you were probably anticipating a $14,000 advance, and that would have been a $10,000 advance. So maybe something happened to where they were independent contractors, or they couldn't find a record of them being an employee when they checked. Perhaps they did a check on that. So on that, I would assume that $1,000 is an EIDL advance and your EIDL request is still pending. Now, if you applied a long time ago, and a long time ago, I mean in March or April, I would probably attend that webinar tomorrow. The good folks at SBA will give you some good straight answers on EIDL issues that you have. And if you've been denied, they'll give you good advice on reconsiderations and what you can do for reconsidering. Chris, I love your question. It's too long. I can't get through it. Received money during an 8-week period. It's the covered period 8 weeks, and then the alternative covered the additional 16 weeks. Good question. Very good question. Okay, so you received the money during the 8-week period, so that was previous to June 5th. There's a covered period and the alternative covered period. The alternative covered period in the 8-week window is something we didn't cover today, but it also can be adjusted to begin with your payroll period. And that is to try to ease some of the complications in some of the calculations. So in the example that I oftentimes use, which is, let me go there, which is this one here, you will see that I started on 4/20 is when I received my funds, but then it was 4/27 when my payroll period ended. It aligned perfectly, so I use that. You can use an alternative covered period, and it could be as short as a few days to align with your payroll cycle. And that is most common now that there's 24 weeks. So the covered period is just alignment. And so if you either elect the 8-week period or you elect the 24-week period, you go from that direction. Okay, there's a few more questions in the chat. We're going to touch on those. In the chat, you'll also find some great links, including tomorrow's Fresno webinar with SBA. So you can copy that and pull that down and sign up for that if you want to. Again, later this week, we will be sending out a lot of documents and a lot of things that are going to be there. I'm checking this. And again, the EIDL advance is not forgiven at all. The EIDL advance will actually flow right into the PPP forgiveness form, and will actually then be an amount that is not forgiven. Okay. Okay, I'm beginning to start the forgiveness process. What should I do first? What I would do first is I would probably make sure I use the spreadsheet that's behind you and allocate it out by employees, unless you have good payroll reports. There's some really good, we'll include the instructions for the PPP, and on page 4 of the instructions for the PPP forgiveness EZ form, it'll show you the list that SBA recommends that you keep for documents, not only that you retain and keep, but also the documents that are going to be needed for you to complete the application. Okay. That looks like it. Okay, it's a wrap. Well, thank you all. Didn't give me time to really go into all the other things that are so important. And those things are things in the spreadsheet or in the PowerPoint presentations like this. We're here for your disaster. Continue to be starting to think about loan deferments and defer your obligations. Cash flow. This happens every time. Cash flow is so vitally important in the incoming months as it is right now. Cash is king. Keep your cash. We have this form. We're going to include it again because we're going to continue to talk about cash flow and planning for your cash flow and determining when you're going to run out of money if you are. You need to continue to be creative and look at opportunities, promote your leadership, and remember, cash is king. We'll be back next week on July 22nd. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kelly Bearden. Have a great afternoon. Goodbye now.